So, boxing fans, here's bullshit for the week for you. Joe Gallagher says Carl Frampton must leave Barry McGuigan if Frampton versus Quigg is going to happen. I'm going to sum up the article, which I'm going to put into the description. Basically, Joe Gallagher said for Frampton versus Quigg to happen, Frampton must leave Barry McGuigan because Barry McGuigan's already talking about stuff like mandatories and not the Frampton versus Quigg fight. I wonder why he's doing that. Chris, do you want to weigh in on why Barry McGuigan is talking about mandatories instead of Frampton versus Quigg?
Well, I don't think Frampton should be bullied, or Team Frampton should be bullied in any way, shape or form by Gallagher's or Matchroom Sports. I think it's Barry McGuigan playing Billy Big Bollocks, to be honest. I think he's showing everyone who's got the power. Everybody, we've talked about it before, and everyone else has talked about it. Frampton doesn't need Quigg. Quigg desperately needs Frampton, and I think he's just flexing his muscles, letting them know who's boss.
There is that, but there's also something else that I'm sure Rory's going to bring in. Rory?
The fact that Frampton now has 90 days to make his mandatory defence.
Exactly.
Or else he strips of his title.
Yes!
Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a title, and the whole reason that they wanted to wait for Quigg Frampton to happen is because stipulation was they both need a title.
Yeah, and it's going to be a unification
if he doesn't defend it, then he doesn't have a title.
And then what do we not have?
We don't have a unification fight.
Oh, exactly.
And also, just to kind of pick up the point, this is what both camps have already said, is that if the fight was going to happen, they wanted it to be next summer, either in, a big sort of MEN type or, large Odyssey arena, or even at a small football stadium. If that's going to happen in summertime, then what are we on now? We're in September. Then surely that indicates on both parties that they're going to both have another fight in between then anyway.
Exactly. This is just Joe Gallagher talking absolute shit again. This guy just can't get out the headlights. He wants everyone to be watching him, reading what he said, even if he's talking absolute bollocks. Chris, do you have anything else to say about Joe Gallagher?
No, I agree with everything you've said. The guy's a proper egotistical prick. He takes centre stage. He takes the limelight off his fighters. Can't do with guys like him, and he's just a gobshite, really. I can't elaborate any further than just say I dislike him.
Yeah, I mean, talking about egotistical people and stuff. What about what Carl Frampton said to Eddie Hearn after the fight, where he said, what did he say? He said, I'll even give it the accent, guys. I'll even give it the accent. He went, "Hey, what Eddie Hearn's got to realise is I'm the one with the real belt." Well, he didn't say that. He said, "I'm the one with the legitimate belt, so I am." What do you think about that?
Well, that's a good riposte to listening to all the bullshit that comes from Matchroom's side and Joe Gallagher's side, isn't it?
Exactly. What did you think about that, Roddy, about when Carl Frampton?
Well, let's be honest. It's true. I saw an iFilm London interview with Scott Quigg about a month ago, maybe not even that, whereby Kugan Cassius introduced Scott Quigg as the regular champion, and Scott Quigg just shook his head, and they had a laugh and a joke about it, and he went, "Well, that's what it is, isn't it?" I was like, "Oh well, yeah, I suppose." And even Scott Quigg knows he's not the proper world champion of that governing body. So if the fighter knows it, then clearly there's no kidding him. It is what it is. Carl Frampton's just telling it as it is.
We're going to end up coming up with this later on, but what do you think the biggest problems making this fight will be, Chris?
Well, there's the obvious one with Barry McGuigan. I think this is what ruined it for Frampton with Matchroom before. Barry McGuigan wanted in on the promotional aspect of it, so that'd be more money coming out of Matchroom's pocket. I think that's the biggest thing, or that's the excuse they're going to use anyway.
Yeah, I see that. There's always also the point that there's a good chance Quigg might not keep his title, until by the time that they're going to fight each other. I mean, let's just assume they're both going to get another defence in next year, and then they're going to have the super fight. There's no guarantee that they're both going to win their fights. really. I mean, even the guy who Carl Frampton's got to fight as a mandatory, he's half decent fighter. If he was fighting Quigg, let's say Quigg fights Kiko Martinez, that's a tough fight, isn't it? I mean, what do you think, Roddy? What problems do you see coming up if this fight's going to be made?
Definitely the defence side of things. I don't know if you guys can probably tell me, but Scott Quigg, the guys he's been fighting, obviously aren't, to be polite, aren't the best. Surely there'll be some decent opponent that, Scott Quigg must have some sort of number one challenger at some point, surely. Number one contender or mandatory.
Maybe, but I'm not sure I'm not sure who that is.
So if that's the case, then he can't carry on fighting cans, and that might be a bigger test than someone he's faced or had to defend it against recently. Another thing that we've touched upon that you've said as well is, promoters and I guess on the Scott Quigg side of things, trainers, sort of arrogance and sticking their oar in. Not just Barry McGuigan, but if Joe Gallagher starts trying to throw his weight around, as I'm sure he will do, then he could be a bit of a thorn in the side. Just to kind of go back to what you said, how arrogant he was. You can tell how arrogant Joe Gallagher is by the fact that he sits on the ring apron right next to the fighter rather than behind him. 9 times out of 10 you'll see a trainer stood behind, letting the fighter take centre stage after a win, and then he'll just jump in as and when he's asked a question. Oh no, Joe Gallagher sat right there almost as if he's been in the ring himself and answers the majority of the questions as well.
That's right, he does. Yeah, here's another thing I've just been thinking about as well. Joe Gallagher might be a big problem coming to this fight, trying to make this fight happen, because it's been known that Joe Gallagher's turned down fights for his fighters. For example, Anthony Crolla versus Hank Lundy was turned down because Joe Gallagher thought it was too risky a fight. Makes you think, doesn't it? Do you think this is too much of a risk of a fight for Scott Quigg? Because I wouldn't say it's a walk in the park fight, would you?
No.
Exactly.
Well, it's not what he's been fighting, has it?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd probably give him an half decent test compared to some of the bums he's fought.
Well, it definitely depends how many weeks you have to train as well, I guess.
Well, to be honest, by the sounds of it, you only need 2 weeks and you can go walk into a Scott Quigg fight anyway. So.
Yeah, Chris, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, talking about Joe Gallagher, I've heard this before about him turning down fights for his fighters. This is the only fight that Scott Quigg has realistically got to make a lot of money out of. He's never going to be challenging the likes of Rigondeaux. It's unlikely he's going to be facing any of the top 5 guys from the WBA. So, he desperately needs Frampton. And I think Joe Gallagher must understand, if they won't pay him, they're going to have to go begging to Frampton, really. Frampton's got a load of options. I heard talk between Abner Maris and Carl Frampton this afternoon, so that's a potential fight for Carl Frampton. Maris said he'd be willing to come down a division, so he's got some big fights coming, and obviously with his following, when it comes to Quigg and Frampton's got all the aces at the minute. He's got the real bargaining power.
That's right. Here's another hiccup, because Quigg doesn't have a real belt, paper belt. I assume he'll still want 50% of the money, won't he?
Well, yeah, but he's never going to get it, is he? I mean, let's be fair. He's a paper champion. I disagree with this whole regular super champion thing. There's one champion throughout, the 4 or 5 governing bodies. These regular champions, these belts, it's like having a WBF belt in it. It's a load of nonsense.
Yeah. In fact, there's something else I heard as well. Just thought I'll throw this out here as well. I heard that Ricky Hatton was sorting out Scott Quigg to be taken to America. This was obviously when he was still fighting him, and fighting on the undercard on Showtime with Golden Boy Promotions cards and stuff. They were going to build him up in America as well. But either he or the trainer, I don't know which one, so don't quote me on that, turned the fight down and said, "Oh no, we're not interested in that."
Well, that's an absolutely ridiculous thing to do when you consider now, the exposure that Frampton gets, the following he's got, for example, it's massive on his side, and Quigg, like him all over him, he's pretty unknown still, even with his paper belt, so, that's probably a train they've missed terribly.
Yeah. Really, we hope this fight happens, but we're going to leave it here, guys. There's a lot of roadblocks, but I'll tell you one thing, That will not help at all. Scott Frampton leaving Barry McGuigan, that won't help anything. And dodging your mandatory won't help anything either. So Joe Gallagher, I think you, mate, have just been pushing that bullshit a little bit too long for me. Thanks for listening, people, and we're out of here.